The cafe on Elm in Westbury always smelled like butter and warm bread just before the dinner rush, when the awnings cast soft stripes of shade across the sidewalk and the amber bulbs began to glow. It was the kind of place where people came to be seen being fine: business lunches, quiet proposals, picture-perfect anniversaries. Tonight the street kept moving, cars nosed by, shoes clicked on old cobblestones, and somewhere a busker tried to find the courage to sing his first note. At the two-top near the window, time didn't move at all. Clara held the baby a little tighter than she needed to. She could feel his tiny breaths against her wrist, the damp warmth where his cheek met the blanket. The weight of him anchored her to the chair when everything else inside felt like it might float away, like she might lift out of her own life and watch it from the ceiling. She'd pictured this meeting so many times that the words seemed worn out before she said them. Across from her, Daniel looked like a billboard for composure: navy suit, slate tie, watch that ticked without apology. He had the posture of a verdict. He'd taken the seat that kept his back to the restaurant, eyes fixed toward the street like an escape hatch. He glanced at the wine the server had poured without asking and didn't touch it, as if enjoying anything in this moment would be a betrayal of a rule he hadn't written but fully intended to enforce. "You didn't ask his name," Clara said. It slipped out of her, not accusation, not plea, more like a fact that had been rolling around between them, gathering a quiet kind of gravity. Daniel's jaw worked once before he answered. "I'm here because you said it was important." "So say what's important." She almost laughed, bitter and small. "He is what's important." Silence took the table the way fog takes a field. The baby made a soft sound and Clara rocked him. "His name is Miles," she said, and set the name down in front of Daniel the way you set down a key, something that might open a door, or might not. Daniel's eyes flicked to the bundle, then away. "You left," he said. "You emptied the dresser. You turned off your location. My calls went straight to voicemail. And now you sit here with a baby and expect, what? That I clap." Clara swallowed. The overhead light pooled on the table and found every tremor in her hands. "I left because I couldn't breathe," she said. "Because we turned our life into a calendar invite that always ran long. Because every night you came home later and every morning you left earlier, and the space in between was where I learned how to sleep without expecting warmth." He stared at her like she'd told him a story about someone else. "You should have told me you were pregnant." She nodded. She had said those words to the ceiling in the sublet 1,000 times. "I should have told you. I should have. I tried," she said. "I had the test in my pocket the night your board extended that meeting until 2 a.m. I sat on the curb outside our building and watched your driver pull away, and I promised myself you'd be the first person to know. And then another day happened. And then another. And then fear learned my name." Daniel picked up the wineglass, turned it, set it down. "So you punished me." "It wasn't punishment," she said softly. "It was survival. I was afraid you'd do what you always do when something doesn't fit: you'd hire someone to hold it for you. A nanny, a night nurse, an assistant for the assistant. I didn't want him to be a line item in your budget." "Don't pretend you know what I would have done," he said, and the sentence had teeth. Clara's eyes welled but didn't spill. "I know what you did with us." Traffic muttered by. Somewhere the busker finally found his voice, a thin brave ribbon of melody. In the kitchen a tray hit the floor and someone laughed like it was nothing. Daniel breathed through his nose, slow and measured, a man doing the math of his life on a napkin. "Is he mine?" he asked, and the words looked like they hurt his mouth. "Look at him," she said. "Look at his mouth when he dreams. It curls like yours when you fall asleep in cars. Look at his hairline and tell me you don't see your grandfather. Look at his fists. They clench for something he wants and doesn't know how to ask for yet." She met his eyes. "Yes, he is yours, and mine, and there isn't a version of this story where he's anything else." The baby stirred as if the truth had touched him. A small hand wriggled free, a starfish reaching for tide. For the first time, Daniel leaned forward. He hesitated like a man who'd spent years making sure nothing could surprise him and then realized life had been planning this one moment all along. He extended a finger. Miles caught it with ferocious trust. Everything in Daniel's body softened at once. His shoulders lowered a half-inch. His mouth unpressed. The street became a blur of gold orbs behind wet glass. He looked at the baby as if looking at a map that labeled the country he'd always been homesick for. "Miles," he repeated, as if calibrating the name to his own voice. When he looked up, the man who ran things had receded. The boy who wanted to be good stood there. "I didn't know," he said, and the apology was so quiet it almost missed its mark. "I know," Clara said, and it was the first time all night that both of them told the truth without defense. He let the baby's grip hold him in place. "I don't know how to be this," he admitted. "I don't know how to be someone who can't be scheduled." Clara smiled a tired, honest smile. "You learn by failing next to him instead of far away." The server arrived with a basket of bread and sensed the weather, backing away with a professional kind of tenderness. Clara shifted Miles to kiss his forehead. Daniel watched her hands. He remembered them sculpting a life that had felt real. Friday pasta, Sunday laundry, the dance they did in the kitchen when both were too tired to be dignified. He remembered the night they promised not to become a headline about a couple who forgot to remember. "What do you want from me?" he asked. The sentence hung between question and plea. "I want you to want," she said, and Daniel blinked at how hard that was to hear. "I want you to hold him because you can't help it. I want you in the 3 a.m. hour when he decides the world is terrible and marvelous at once. I want you at the appointment where the pediatrician says he's fine and we both cry anyway. I want you when he laughs for the first time and we both realize our faces weren't built big enough to hold that kind of joy. And if you can't want those things, then I want you to say it now so I don't teach him to look at the door." Daniel pressed his thumb to the baby's knuckles and felt the pulse of something echo back. "I don't know how to want anything I can't guarantee." "That's how you know it's real," she said. "It scares you." They sat with the fear like old furniture no one had the funds to replace. Miles' grip loosened, sleep tugging him toward the quiet place. Daniel exhaled and looked at the buildings across the street, the brick that had held up 100 years of people who thought they might break. He had always understood the relief of good numbers, the relief of contracts that made promises legal. This was different. This was the relief of surrendering a war that only existed inside him. "Come with me," he said suddenly. Clara blinked. "Where?" "Home," he said, then shook his head. "Not." He closed his eyes. "Not to the condo. To my mother's. She's out of town. The backyard smells like tomatoes. It's quiet. The clock in the hallway ticks like a heartbeat. I want to hold him and not have anyone watch me learn." Clara looked down at the baby and then at Daniel. She could see the offer for what it was. Not a trap, not a performance, an opening. She had left once without saying goodbye because goodbye sounded like the wrong story. She had dreamed of this look on Daniel's face while eating cereal over the sink with a baby asleep on her shoulder. "Okay," she said, "but I'm not promising anything more than tonight. Tonight is more than I deserve," he said, surprising them both. They walked the 4 blocks in a pocket of quiet that didn't belong to the city. Daniel carried Miles with the concentration of a man holding a cathedral. His stride slowed when the baby breathed in and out against his chest. At a crosswalk, he looked at Clara like he was asking permission to keep existing. At his mother's house the porch light cast a low halo. He fumbled the key. Clara steadied his hand without comment. Inside, the hallway clock ticked exactly as advertised. The living room smelled faintly of old wood and the lemon oil from a lifetime of Saturdays. They didn't turn on more lights than they needed. Shadows wrote their names on the walls, friendly and unhurried. Daniel sat on the couch and Miles settled like he belonged there. The suit jacket came off, the shirt sleeves rolled up. The cufflink that had never learned how to be anything but perfect clinked like it forgave him. Clara watched him discover the inventory of the newborn universe, the hiccup that shakes a tiny ribcage, the way the lips pucker in practice for dreams, the startle that announces life is surprising and will remain so. "Tell me what you did the day he was born," Daniel said. Clara told him about the cab that got lost and the nurse who hummed a song from the 80s and the way the hospital ceiling had a tile shaped like a sail. She told him about crying not from pain but from the relief of hearing someone cry that wasn't her. She told him she whispered 3 names to the baby just to see which one felt like it already belonged to him, and how Miles had turned the room the color of courage. Daniel listened with the reverence of a person learning the laws of a country he might move to. "Do you ever forgive me?" he asked into a quiet that might have been sleep if it weren't so awake. Clara traced a line on the baby's blanket. "I forgive the part of you that didn't know how to stop running. I don't forgive the part that never looked back to see if I'd fallen." She let that sit where it needed to. "But I'm here, and that means something I don't have language for yet." They stayed like that, the 3 of them, while the clock kept counting a currency that never depreciates. In the kitchen, the refrigerator coughed the way old appliances do. It made a sound like advice. Daniel stood and paced the length of the rug and back, a new father's first pilgrimage. He laughed once, startled by how much the laughing hurt. Tomorrow, he said, and the word didn't sound like a threat for the first time in months. Can I come over? I'll bring coffee. Or tea. I'll bring whatever you trust. I can hold him while you shower and pretend that's an act of heroism. Clara smiled without trying to make it smaller. You can come. Bring the cheap bagels from the deli on 9th. They taste like Saturday used to. He nodded, storing the instruction as if it were sacred. Will you? He stopped. Will you teach me how to be someone he reaches for? You start by being someone who reaches back, she said. Every time. Just before dawn, Miles woke and announced his hunger with the absolute confidence of the very small. They moved through the choreography of it, bottle warmed, burp cloth found, murmurs shaped like lullabies. Daniel held him after, upright, the tiny head against his collarbone. The baby fell asleep so fast it felt like a trick. Daniel looked at Clara with the awe of a man at the ocean who sees the wave he survived and the ones he didn't know were coming. This is terrifying, he whispered. Good, she whispered back. You're here. Morning softened the edges of everything. The city outside stretched and yawned and forgave. Daniel carried Miles to the window and watched the street become itself again. Dog walkers, joggers, a kid on a scooter chasing a thing no one else could see. He turned and found Clara watching him with a face that contained the first brick of something that might someday be called trust. He cleared his throat. I called the office, he said. Told them I need a week. Since when do you take a week? She asked, not disguised awe. Since I met my son, he said, and didn't care that the sentence tasted like a cliché. Clichés are just truths worn soft by use. They walked back to the café for their stroller. Clara had left it in the corner because she couldn't carry everything she was carrying. The morning staff recognized the shape of last night and said nothing. Daniel left too big a tip for 2 small coffees and didn't apologize for that either. On the sidewalk he stopped, looked up at the slice of sky between buildings that belonged to everybody, and took a breath that found parts of his lungs he hadn't used since childhood. I don't know what the ending is, he said. We don't have an ending, Clara said. We have a middle. We're brave enough to stay inside. He reached for her free hand, awkwardly at first, like they were teenagers faking a movie, and then found it. She let him, the way you let a door be a door even if it once slammed. They walked until the sun made everything ordinary enough to carry. That afternoon he returned with bagels and strawberries and the willingness to be clumsy. He changed a diaper and wore defeat like a crown. He learned the sound Miles made right before a cry and the one right after. He kissed the top of the baby's head and didn't explode. He only exploded a little when he realized love can detonate quietly and leave the building standing. At 3:12 p.m., Miles smiled in a way that could have been gas but wasn't, not to them. They cheered in whispers and cried like the ridiculous people they had vowed never to become. Daniel wiped his face with his sleeve and didn't hide it. Clara laughed at him and with him and because of him. The apartment filled with a brand new kind of noise, the sound of 3 people making room. Night returned like it always does, faithful and a little dramatic. They went back to the cafe because some places become witness. They took the same table. The server who'd learned their weather offered them water with lemon and a look that said she'd root for them even if she didn't know how. The street hummed. Warm bulbs hung like patient moons. Between 2 glasses of wine they still didn't drink, their hands found each other without dialogue. What if we break again? Daniel asked, because fear will always submit its paperwork. Then we fix again, Clara said. And if we can't, we raise him like we promised, with truth and gentleness and the knowledge that love is not a straight line but it is a road worth walking. He looked at Miles asleep in the stroller, at the tiny fists unclenched, at the mouth learning calm. He looked at Clara and saw the woman he'd chosen before he learned to choose the wrong things. He let out a breath that made space where there hadn't been any. The city slid into evening, and the cafe lamps lifted a small constellation just for them. For once, the table between them wasn't a battlefield. It was a bridge. Fragile, yes, but bridges are supposed to hold weight. They do it by accepting the pull from both sides and deciding not to fall. Daniel reached across and brushed a crumb from Clara's sleeve and left his hand there. She didn't move it away. A breeze lifted the awning and put it back down. Somewhere a busker changed keys and got it right. Somewhere a life they hadn't planned began. They didn't toast and they didn't make speeches. They watched their son sleep and learned a new clock that didn't live on their phones. When the server asked if they wanted anything else, they said no in the same voice, and it sounded like yes to the next thing, whatever it turned out to be. No contract recorded the moment. No photograph captured it clean. But if anyone had asked the street what it saw, it would have said this: a man who thought he knew what power was, a woman who thought she had to carry everything, and a child who taught them both a small, stubborn theorem. Hold on, reach back, begin again under warm cafe lights, where ordinary nights do the work of miracles so quietly you almost miss them. And they did, again and again, until again began to feel like a promise kept.